My name is Eleanor Hayes. Most people call me Granny Ellie. I'm 78 years old now, with silver hair, soft hands, and memories that feel heavier with every passing year. I've lived through joy and pain, prosperity and heartbreak, love and betrayal, but nothing, absolutely nothing, cut as deeply as what happened when my son got married, and I kept silent about the $53 million I had inherited from my late husband. Let me start from the beginning. I married Edward Hayes when I was barely 22. He was a kind, soft-spoken man with gentle eyes and a love for small things: morning coffee on the porch, handwritten letters, flowers blooming by the windowsill. We didn't have much, but somehow, that never mattered. We built a life together brick by brick, saving every penny, always laughing through the struggles. When our son Daniel was born, I remember holding him against my chest, my heart swelling with pride and fear all at once. I vowed then and there that I'd give him everything I could: education, love, protection from life's harshness. Edward was a hard-working man. He ran a small manufacturing business, built over decades. We poured our lives into it, and when he passed away unexpectedly from a heart condition, the world stopped for me. I grieved. I cried in the dark. I buried my face in the quilt he stitched by hand. But then, something unexpected happened. Edward had been quietly planning for the future. It turns out, over the years, he had accumulated wealth far beyond what I ever imagined. Investments, properties, stocks, amounting to a staggering $53 million. I was overwhelmed when the lawyers told me. I felt guilty at first, as if it were wrong to have so much when he wasn't around to share it. But then I thought, this money should help Daniel. It should make his life easier. I kept it in trust, carefully hidden, invested wisely, and used it only when necessary. I didn't announce it. I wanted him to grow without the weight of wealth, without being coddled or spoiled. I told myself I was protecting him from greed and false friends. At the time, it felt like the right decision. Years passed. Daniel grew into a smart, driven man. He was ambitious, but had his father's gentleness. He became a lawyer, traveled for work, and eventually fell in love. That's where it all started to unravel. I watched from afar as Daniel's world shifted, from the cheerful boy who clung to my apron, to a man lost in deadlines, meetings, and new faces. But whenever he came home, he was always respectful, always kind, always hugging me tightly like I was his anchor. It was enough, or so I thought. Her name was Vanessa. Oh, she was beautiful, tall, radiant, sharp-eyed. Everyone said she was a perfect match. Graceful, well-educated, confident. She charmed Daniel, the family, even the neighbors. At first, I welcomed her with open arms. I wanted to believe she loved my son as much as he loved her. I cooked dinners, embroidered table linens, and smiled whenever she entered the room. But deep inside, a small uneasiness began to form. She never quite looked at me with warmth, more like obligation, like tolerance. Still, I told myself, love is complicated, and I mustn't judge too quickly. The months leading to their wedding were full of hustle and bustle. Invitations were sent, flowers ordered, venues booked, outfits picked out. I busied myself helping, offering advice, making arrangements. I wanted to be part of it all. But somehow, I felt distant. I noticed that the guest list barely mentioned me. The formal invitations never reached my mailbox. When I asked gently, I was told, "Oh, we'll handle it, Grandma. It's all taken care of." I brushed it off. Maybe they thought it would be easier that way. Maybe they feared I'd interfere. I convinced myself it didn't matter. The day of the wedding came. I dressed in my best, my soft blue silk dress, pearls that once belonged to Edward, and a small smile forced on my face. I waited by the window, holding back tears. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 3 p.m. By 4, I could hear faint music and laughter from the park nearby. I knew then. They didn't invite me. I sat quietly in my living room, clutching Edward's old photo album. I poured tea into my cup and sat by the window, watching guests arrive. Cars pulled up, dresses sparkled, laughter filled the air. There was my son, Daniel, in a black suit, smiling beside Vanessa, glowing under the afternoon sun. They exchanged vows, exchanged rings, smiled for pictures, embraced one another. I cried silently. No one looked toward the house where I sat. No one thought to call, to knock, to ask how I was. I didn't scream. I didn't storm the venue. I simply sat there numb. People ask me, why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you confront them? I stayed silent because I loved Daniel too much to shame him. I wanted him to be happy, even if it was without me. I told myself love is letting go. But that night, I made a decision. They didn't ask me to witness their vows. They didn't ask me to bless their union. Fine. Let them live in a world where secrets have power, where silence cuts deeper than words. Let them learn that what they ignore can change everything. This was how my story began, not with anger, but with heartbreak, and a quiet promise that I would no longer be invisible. For a few weeks after the wedding, I told myself to focus on healing. I kept busy, dusting shelves, tending to the roses Edward loved, and writing letters to old friends. But deep inside, the quiet anger that had started to simmer only grew stronger. I wanted to believe that Daniel would reach out, that he would call to check on me, that he would realize what family means. But nothing came. Instead, I began to notice whispers, small things people didn't think I'd hear. The neighbor's wife, in passing, mentioned that Daniel and Vanessa had moved into their new apartment in the city, far away from the family home. Another friend hinted that Daniel had been too busy for family gatherings. I smiled and nodded, but my heart twisted. And then one night, fate handed me the truth. It was late November. The air had turned crisp, and frost rimmed the edges of the window pane. I had dozed off on the couch when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Hello? I whispered. A soft, trembling voice answered. Is this Mrs. Hayes? Yes, this is Eleanor Hayes. Who's speaking? I don't know how to say this, ma'am, the woman choked. I'm Vanessa's old friend, from college. My breath caught. I sat upright. There's something you should know, about Daniel and Vanessa. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The woman hesitated. I didn't want to say anything, but I feel terrible keeping it from you. Tell me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What she told me that night was more devastating than I ever imagined. Vanessa had been seeing someone else long before the wedding. A business partner, someone charming, smooth-talking, someone Vanessa confided in more than she did with Daniel. They had continued the affair even after the wedding, meeting secretly at hotels, exchanging messages, sharing a passion fueled by lust and convenience. I'm so sorry, ma'am, the voice sobbed. I know it's wrong, but I had to tell you. The line went dead. I sat frozen, phone clutched in my hand. My vision blurred. My heart raced so violently I thought it might stop. My first instinct was to scream, to call Daniel, to confront him and Vanessa both. But something inside me stayed still. I sat back down, breathing slowly, tears streaming down my face. The silence around me felt suffocating, as if the walls themselves had turned against me. The next day, I didn't sleep. I stared at Edward's photograph, asking him silently, why didn't you prepare me for this? But grief wasn't enough. I needed answers. Over the next few days, I quietly observed. I asked questions. I checked social media. And there it was. A picture. A snapshot from a weekend getaway. Vanessa and her lover, laughing in bed, arms entwined, oblivious to the world. There was no hiding it now. My son's wedding had been a lie, a performance crafted to please others while hiding betrayal. I cried into my pillow until morning. When I finally heard from Daniel, it was almost 2 weeks later. Grandma, I've been meaning to call. It's been crazy. His voice was strained, rehearsed. I let him speak. He spoke of new responsibilities, endless paperwork, the stress of building a life in the city. His words felt hollow. I wanted to scream, "You were married while lying. You let me fade away like a ghost." But I kept quiet. Instead, I simply said, "Take care of yourself, dear." He sighed. "I miss you." I hung up. For hours I sat by the window, staring at the fading light, until my tears dried and my heart hardened. How could I go on loving him? Part of me wanted to send him a letter, to confront him, to shame him. Another part wanted to walk away forever. But another, darker part began to whisper. Let them feel the weight of their choices. Let them face the emptiness their betrayal has built. For the first time in years, I felt rage, a quiet, smoldering rage that seeped into every corner of my soul. The betrayal cut deeper than the wedding snub. This was not just about being ignored, it was about deception, about the man I raised lying to my face, about the woman I welcomed into my home mocking my kindness. I no longer wanted justice, I wanted consequence. But I didn't rush. I didn't send the police. I didn't call their friends. Instead, I began to gather knowledge. I tracked patterns, hotel stays, meetings, finances, schedules. I read between the lines of posts, observed the way their eyes looked at each other, and pieced together what they wanted to keep hidden. The more I uncovered, the more fuel the fire became. One evening, while sitting with a cup of tea, I whispered to myself, if they think I'll disappear quietly, they've made a mistake. That night, I wrote in my journal, they will remember me. From that day forward, I lived with one purpose. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't hint. I became the quiet, dignified grandmother everyone thought I was. But inside, every smile, every word, every silence was calculated. I learned when they would travel, who they trusted, how they managed their accounts, and where their secrets could crumble. I began collecting documents, recording conversations, preserving every piece of proof like precious evidence. It felt strange to plan revenge, but I told myself it wasn't about hurting for the sake of it, it was about balance. About teaching them the weight of their choices without destroying what little remained of their lives. And then one cold winter evening, as I sat by the fire, staring into the dancing flames, I made my final vow. I will not be forgotten, I whispered. I will not be discarded. I closed my eyes, and in that moment, I knew this wasn't going to be just a small confrontation. It would be a storm. It would be a reckoning. It would be a storm they never saw coming. I never thought I would become this person. For decades, I had been the kind of woman who forgave easily, who believed love should be unconditional, who taught Daniel that loyalty was the cornerstone of family. But now, betrayal had carved hollow spaces in my heart where warmth once lived. I still cried, but not for the same reasons anymore. I cried for the mother I had been, for the wife I had loved, for the trust one had given freely, and for the poison that had seeped into the lives of the people I cherished most. But grief alone wouldn't fuel what I needed to do. It was anger. It was heartbreak. It was pride. And it was something else. Something darker. Late at night, I would sit before the mirror, wrapped in the same soft shawl Edward used to drape over my shoulders, and stare into my own eyes. Is this what I've become? I whispered aloud. A vengeful shadow? Yet even in the stillness, I would see the reflection of Edward's face superimposed over mine. His eyes, calm and kind, seemed to ask, would you become bitter, Eleanor? Would you let their selfishness destroy you? I wanted to answer no, but they left me no choice. I clenched my jaw and traced the fine lines etched by years of laughter and sorrow. You always told me to stand tall, I murmured. I will. My neighbor, Mrs. Parker, once asked gently, you haven't been yourself lately, dear. I smiled faintly, just remembering old times. She reached out, patting my hand. Take care of yourself. You deserve peace. How could I explain that peace had been stolen? Instead, I nodded, thanked her, and returned to my sanctuary, my small study where I began drafting my plan. It wasn't about rushing. Revenge, I realized, had to be elegant, deliberate. It needed to reflect the very way I had been deceived, silently, cunningly, and with devastating precision. I made lists. I wrote out timelines. I tracked their patterns for months. What did they value most? Their reputation, their finances, their so-called perfect image on social media, the illusion of happiness. And I would strike at each of these. I began by assembling proof in ways they would never suspect. I requested copies of hotel receipts under pretexts of charity donations and community involvement. I posed as a wellness coach and obtained anonymous testimonies from service staff, those who had seen them together. I created digital archives of social media posts, timestamps, and location data. I even retrieved a voice memo accidentally backed up from a cloud account, where Daniel's laughter intertwined with another man's whispers. Each piece of evidence felt like a shard of glass in my hands, sharp but steady. It wasn't enough to know the facts, I needed to feel their weakness. I quietly watched how Vanessa reacted to guilt. She never apologized, never admitted fault, but she sought attention more aggressively whenever something seemed off. Daniel, on the other hand, grew impatient when questioned. He avoided eye contact, diverted conversations, and clung to defenses like a drowning man. Understanding their patterns helped me anticipate how they would crumble once truth was exposed. One of the hardest things was writing the letter. I wanted it to sting, but not too harshly. I wanted it to feel like the collapse of trust, like the weight of their own conscience breaking them apart. I drafted it over and over. You built your lives on lies. You hurt the people who trusted you most. I will not scream. I will not beg. I will simply show you what truth looks like. May you face the reflection of your own choices. I read it aloud at night, tears pooling in my eyes, before tearing it up and rewriting it again. Though I kept my plan mostly to myself, I found unexpected allies. Mrs. Parker, the neighbor, became a sounding board when I needed to vent. She didn't ask questions, she simply listened, nodding with quiet empathy. A former colleague, Mr. Whitman, discreetly helped me gather financial records from public databases. Even my old church secretary, Sister Agnes, unknowingly provided crucial information about their charity involvement and tax filings. Each ally had no idea how far this would go. I never told them, I only accepted their kindness with quiet gratitude. One evening, while sipping chamomile tea by the fireplace, I realized I no longer felt paralyzed by grief. I no longer needed to weep for the family I had lost. I had transformed. The woman in the mirror was still Eleanor, but her eyes, once soft with love, now burned with quiet determination. I whispered to the fire, I will be the calm before the storm. My first step would be exposure, but not all at once. I wanted them to feel the creeping terror of truth before it engulfed them. The plan. Send an anonymous message with a photo hinting at their affair, but not enough to expose them fully. Leak a rumor at a charity event that they were under investigation for financial misconduct. Send carefully worded notes to Daniel's closest friends, making them question his integrity without outright lying. Keep my own identity hidden until the final act. It felt dangerous. But danger had never frightened me more than betrayal. The night before sending the first message, I sat by Edward's photograph again. Are you proud of me? I whispered. The soft flicker of the candlelight danced across his face. I'm not hurting anyone out of cruelty, I told him. I'm only holding them accountable for the lives they've destroyed. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of peace, not because I was about to hurt them, but because I knew I was finally honoring the truth. As I sealed the first envelope that night, I hesitated for a moment. My hands trembled. I could still walk away. But then deep inside I felt it, a wave of resolve stronger than fear. I pressed my lips together, whispered, no turning back, and slid the envelope into my purse. Tomorrow, everything would begin. The morning I sent that first message, the air felt heavier than ever. I dressed quietly, wrapped my shawl tight around me, and stepped out into the chill dawn with a calmness that startled even me. This wasn't rage, it was precision. I walked to the mailbox with deliberate steps and slipped the envelope inside. The paper, heavy and creamy, contained only a single photograph. It showed Daniel and Vanessa laughing together in an embrace at a resort they had claimed to visit separately. No message. No accusation. Just proof. It was enough to start unraveling them. By the time noon came, I could sense the tension brewing. From Mrs. Parker's front porch, I overheard whispers from passers-by. I saw something on Daniel's account. Can't believe it. Vanessa always seemed too perfect, didn't she? My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm as I returned to my study. The second step was far riskier. I crafted a message to the charity board using a burner email account. It implied discrepancies in their donations and hinted at possible embezzlement. I attached forged documents, plausible enough to cause worry, vague enough to be dismissed as rumor if needed. Then I drafted texts to Daniel's closest friends, carefully written, friendly but ambiguous. Hey, just a heads up. Something weird came up about Daniel's recent activities. Hope it's nothing serious. Each message felt like a stone tossed into still water. The following week was surreal. I watched them from a distance at social gatherings, how their smiles flickered, how their eyes darted toward each other in fear, how Vanessa's fingers nervously twisted the stem of her wine glass. At a fundraiser dinner, a gentleman from the board raised an eyebrow and whispered to Daniel, "We should audit the accounts, just in case." Daniel's jaw tightened. He laughed it off, but I could see the strain in his eyes. Vanessa avoided eye contact completely and excused herself early. I sat across the room, unnoticed, and felt a deep, dark satisfaction. Next, I mailed short, handwritten notes to Daniel's circle of friends. One read, "Not everything is as it seems, trust but verify." Another, "Secrets destroy families. Just saying." None of them could trace where the notes came from. None dared ask too many questions aloud. But soon enough, gossip began swirling. Daniel's old college buddy texted me, a fake name I used to inquire about charity contacts. "Weird vibes lately. Is something going on?" I smiled as I typed back, "Better safe than sorry." The third step came at the family dinner Daniel had planned to clear the air. I knew it would be the perfect moment to pull the final threads. I sent them both the second envelope the morning of the dinner. Inside this time, I included a transcript of their whispered conversation recorded from the resort hallway, one where Daniel promised Vanessa they'd figure it out and keep it quiet. The paper trembled in their hands when they opened it at the table. I wasn't present, but word spread quickly. By the time dessert was served, their faces were pale. Daniel's voice shook as he mumbled excuses. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to speak. Guests exchanged worried glances. No one knew what to say. And that was the point. The final blow came a week later when I orchestrated their public collapse. Using accounts I'd meticulously crafted over months, I posted screenshots on social media threads they frequented, anonymous accounts discussing trust issues, fake philanthropy, and disgraced families. Soon enough, Daniel's professional contacts began distancing themselves. A former investor pulled back funding. A charity halted their partnership. Vanessa's online following plummeted. I sat quietly in my home, watching the notifications roll in. There was no gloating, just a deep, solemn satisfaction. They had built their lives on appearances. I had merely shown them the cracks. A week later, Daniel appeared at my front door. He looked exhausted, sleep-deprived, hollow-eyed, desperate. "Eleanor," he whispered, almost inaudible. "Please, help us fix this." For a moment, my heart wavered. I wanted to open the door, to help. But I remembered every whispered lie, every tear Vanessa had hidden from me, every moment Daniel ignored my calls. I stood still. "I'm sorry," I replied softly, closing the door gently but firmly. He stood there for a long moment before walking away. Months after their collapse, I sent them the final letter. Not anonymously this time. It arrived with my signature, written with care, as if nothing in the world could hurt them anymore. You wanted perfection, so you built your world on lies. You chose secrecy over truth, pride over compassion, appearances over love. I could scream, I could curse, but I chose to let truth speak for itself. I hope you learn that love without honesty is a hollow shell. May the life you built on deception teach you what it means to be human. I sealed the letter with care. That night, I sat by the fire with Edward's photograph once more. I did what I had to do, I whispered. The flames danced, flickering shadows across the walls. Some part of me grieved still. But I knew I had stood my ground. Even now, when I look back, I wonder, did I go too far? Was revenge the only way to reclaim my dignity? Or was it the only language they would understand? I will tell you the rest, but that's for another time. For now, know this. I am not a villain. I am a woman who refused to be silent. The weeks turned into months, and with them, the sharp edges of the chaos I had set in motion slowly dulled. Time doesn't erase scars, but it teaches you how to carry them. Daniel and Vanessa had retreated from public life. Their accounts went quiet, their faces vanished from social media, and invitations to events stopped coming altogether. The charity had officially severed ties, citing a breach of trust. People whispered about them but avoided naming them. They were alive, but stripped of the image they had so carefully crafted. I watched from the sidelines. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I didn't gather with others to relish their suffering. The revenge had already spoken for itself. Every message, every rumor, every doubt, those were seeds I had planted. Now they grew, quietly and destructively, and I let them reap what they sowed. In the beginning, I feared the emptiness that would follow once the storm passed. But life has a strange way of healing what anger cannot. I began volunteering again, this time at a hospice. I spent my days sitting beside those who had no one, holding hands that trembled with uncertainty. Helping someone pass peacefully gave me a quiet satisfaction that no revenge ever could. Neighbors stopped asking about Daniel and Vanessa after a while. Their own lives resumed, busy with errands, family dinners, and weekend plans. As for me, I focused on my garden. Roses, lavender, and rosemary bloomed in neat rows, fragrant reminders that beauty returns, even after grief, even after betrayal. One afternoon, I received a letter, not from Daniel or Vanessa, but from an old friend, Margaret. Her note read, "I heard what happened. I hope you found peace." I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time. Peace. Was that what I had? I thought of the rage that had consumed me, the hours spent planning every move, the thrill of watching them falter. And I asked myself, honestly, had I found peace? It wasn't a clean yes. But I had found something else, strength. Strength in choosing when to speak, when to remain silent, when to fight, and when to walk away. Strength in knowing that dignity cannot be given, it must be claimed. Months later, I ran into Daniel unexpectedly at the grocery store. His hair was streaked with gray, his posture stooped, his eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. He froze when he saw me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he lowered his gaze and nodded. No apology. No excuse. No demand. Just a silent acknowledgement that our paths had crossed before, and that everything had changed. I nodded back. And then I smiled. Take care of yourself, Daniel, I said softly. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in months. So, my dear listeners, here's what I want you to understand. Revenge can feel like justice. It can give you a sense of control when everything feels like it's slipping away. But it's never about the other person, It's about how you choose to carry your own pain. I could have screamed. I could have ruined them outright. I could have exposed every secret without restraint. Instead, I chose to let the truth do the work. Not because I am cruel, but because I refuse to be powerless. You don't always need to fight with fists or fire. Sometimes, you fight with clarity. You fight by standing tall when everyone else expects you to crumble. And when you do, you teach others, without shouting, that strength isn't loud. It's steady. It's quiet. It's the choice to protect yourself, even when the world demands you remain silent. If you're holding on to hurt today, know that you are not weak. You are allowed to feel anger, betrayal, sadness, but how you respond defines you. Forgive when you can. Stand firm when you must. Most importantly, remember that your worth is never determined by those who try to break you. This is my story, a story of love, betrayal, heartbreak, revenge, and ultimately peace. And I share it with you, so you know you are never alone.